my fellow readers. I am back with another light novel. This is Bonin book number 2, The Long, Long Goodbye of the Last Bookstore. So you can either go back and watch the video of the first volume, or if you remember, it is the story of the young man whose girlfriend is a book. Well, like a character in the book, but he can talk to the book, so it's also the book. I don't know, it's weird, because really, like, the book, I think, was the main character of said book, but it's not really that character. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Anyway, like, it's the book, but kind of her personified image through him is the way that the main character looks. Does that make sense? Like, it's a little weird. It was a little weird then, but essentially, he goes on these episodic quests to solve these little mysteries within the book, like reuniting books with their owners, helping an independent, was he independent? But like a light novel writer, and yeah, and all the while he does that by talking to the books and running their course. This one is another turn. This is the, I would say, second light novel series, volume 2, where I have just been totally more swept away by the second volume than the first one. So the other one was The Haunted Bookstore, which had a great volume 2, and then this volume is way, way above what I would consider volume 1 at. Not that volume 1 was bad, it just, I don't know, the pacing and everything was just more episodic. Like, you could read a part of it, set it aside, come back later, read the next part, because each chapter were so independent, whereas this is much more united. There's more bond with this story, and I think even more emotionally driven than the other one. So this does tell the story of a bookshop or bookstore where the owner has just died, and he wasn't that old, but he's just died, and the bookstore is going to have to close. There's no one to take over it, and you get the whole backstory of what's been going on from there. For example, it's revealed that the bookstore owner had a wife and son that were both lost in the typhoon. So the one person who would have inherited the shop, who could have kept things going, has passed away. We also learn, like, he lost his father, I think, young, and his father had lost his father. So it's like generations of, like, where people have been running this store but have faced tragic endings, and it's, I don't know, it's very emotionally driven seeing that, but then also the impacted stories within the community. So I don't want to get too much into all the stories, but, like, there's a young boy who would have been about his son's age, I think, and how his life was impacted. Like, he got to meet his best friend at this bookstore. They ended up sharing a similar interests. But at the same time, it was his recovery as well, because I think he had lost his, I feel like, I don't want to say this wrong, but I feel like he might have lost his mother in the typhoon as well. And it was either that or he was just too scared, but he hadn't talked since then. And then in going to the bookstore and meeting this friend and finding books that he likes, he was finally able to come back out and talk again. So there was that very emotional story. There's the story of the bookstore owner's best friend, who's a writer, and how this guilt that he's carried over an instance that happened between the two of them for all these years, and a woman who had fallen in love with the author as a young girl, and how things have impacted her life. And just all these little stories that yes, there were still these little stories, but it was the overall and overarching storyline of this bookstore and what it meant to people and the community, but also the person owned the bookstore and his impact on the community and how he would interact with people. And there was always a special quality in finding people what they would need or would want or be interested in. And I don't know. I was glad that it took this turn, that it wasn't so much the weird kind of humor of like, my girlfriend's a book. Although, yes, he is in this book and he talks about his girlfriend and everything who's a book. It's much more on these very personal, very emotional stories than it is like about him and his book girlfriend. And I think that worked so much better, because it's not like I don't like the character. I think he's a good character, and within this he reminds people of the bookstore owner. And if you want to know like how he relates to it, the bookstore owner has left him the contents of the bookstore, so not the bookstore itself but the books. He's kind of left him in charge of overseeing the books and what happens to them, which makes sense. As someone that can talk to books, he cares for them greatly and will try to do what's best for them. But yeah, he gets to come in and like be saying his goodbye and interacting with these other characters, and in so doing, like, all these emotional stories are revealed. Each person is able to share their memories of the store and maybe a book that they got there that greatly impacted their lives. And you know, if you've had that kind of experience where a book has meant a lot to you, or even an interaction with a certain person, like a librarian or a bookstore owner who seemed to get you, then I think this is a very relatable volume of the series. And this is how it was to me. And I think, if I remember correctly, like, this is, she actually opens the book. That's one of the store workers who was very saddened by the death of her boss. And this is the other co-worker. And then this would have been the bookstore owner here in the middle. And yeah. I'll quickly read before I close out, because I've done enough really explaining, but I'll just let it also read here what the actual book said this was about. So this is a touching tale of books and loss, which I think I've explained enough already. With the untimely death of third-generation bookseller Emon Komoto, a small Tohoku town loses its last bookstore. However, just as the part-time staff are gearing up for its closing sale, high schooler Musubu Enoki, who we know Musubu is the one who dates the books, shows up out of nowhere claiming that the late owner entrusted him with all the texts in the shop. As patrons come from far and wide to bid the store farewell during its final week of operation, Musubu uses his ability to converse with books to reunite people through their most treasured tomes. But can these nostalgic, interconnected encounters lead him to the truth behind Emon's passing? So, yes, it will lead to the actual story of how Emon died, since it was so sudden and emotional. But would recommend this. So far, I've enjoyed both books in this series. Like, I can't complain, but this one ranks so much higher than the first one that I don't know. I'd be tempted to be like, even if you missed the first one, pick this one up, because I think you'd get enough out of it to understand like some of what happened in the first one. But super good. I loved this volume so much that I just I'm interested to see what happens next. Like, will there be more volumes? I think at this point this is it. There hasn't been any more done yet, but I'll see. If there's another one that comes out, I'll probably pick up the tail, but I hope it's at least as good as this, because this was super good in comparison to the first one. That's it for this video. Until next time, bye.